What's that I see on the horizon? Carburetors for a CB750. Welcome to Hack a Week. Here we go again. Bags of hardware, boxes of hardware, service manuals, and we're going to get started trying to figure out how all this carburetor stuff goes back together. It looks like I've got two complete sets of carburetors here because there's a lot of duplicate items in these bags of freshly zinc plated parts. So I'm going to first lay everything out here on the bench and just go through it all. ID all the pieces and parts, put the duplicates next to each other, pick out all the best, and then we'll build a set of carburetors. Let's start off with the bags of goodies here. See what we have going on. Let's just dump all this stuff out, bag at a time, and then we'll start going through it. Let's see, we're just going to find everything that looks the same, all the duplicates of things, and just group them together. These are for the throttle cables, some more linkages, and that looks like that is about it. Looks like I've got groups of 4 of a lot of things. Some stuff just only 3. There's also some jars of things here. Let's see. This stuff in this box is all mostly internals of the carburetor, the jets and things like that. There may be some other screws that are actually close to some of the stuff here on the bench. But there's what I got so far for hardware. Okay, move all that aside, and we'll move on to these two. These are all the throttle slides. There's everything out of those 2 jars, almost 2 complete sets. I'm missing one of the rings that holds the cap on, but that's it. The ring on the top, the slides, the top of the carb, the connector for the slide, the bolt for the slide, and the needles. Put the rest of this stuff in a few more parts bins here. Now we have this little box, and this has float bowls in it with floats. There's 4 of those. Let's see, inside there's a few parts lingering about. Let's make sure we get all those out. Some needle valves for the fuel inlet. Okay, this is a bit of a mishmash of stuff here. There's the old needle valves, rods for the floats. There's only like 3 jets kicking around here. There's a seat for one of the needle valves, some miscellaneous bolts, screws, nuts, and washers, and that's all just going to go back into one of these little parts bins here. Not going to worry too much about sorting that out because a lot of this looks like I have duplicates of it in the parts that I sorted out earlier that were already zinc plated. So we're just going to chuck all this miscellaneous stuff into one container. Next up, the first 4 carburetor bodies. These have all the parts in them. The jets are in them, the needle seat valves in there, the floats are in place. Nothing's been taken out of these yet. All the screws, everything's in place on these guys. So more than likely these are the ones I'll rebuild because I know that everything is there on them already. So yep, that's those. Let's just set those right here for now. And I got another set here. Oh, look at that. There's the missing 4th ring for the carburetors there, the ones I was missing. Now these guys have all the guts pulled out already. So I'm just going to set those aside, I think. They look like they maybe have been cleaned a little. Some of them still have the jets in, but these, I'm going to treat these like my spares. So they're going to go over in the spare parts pile. Now we got some more stuff. There's the float bowls that go with these guys. They've got the drain lines still on them. So we're going to keep those aside. I've got 2 complete mounting frames here. But for right now, we'll just pick one of these and run with it. I'm just going to take the cleaner one, I guess. This goes in the spare parts. These are the frames that lift up the throttle slides. If you were to look at them from the side, they go like this. And as these rise up, they lift up on the throttle slide with this piece right here that sits in there. So that's what that's about. I need 2 of those. And let's see, it looks like they're kind of a symmetrical thing here. So what do we got? We got 2 that are like that, and we got 2 that are like that. So I guess I just need 1 of each. So let's see, we'll pick these 2 spare parts. This is the fuel line that goes between the carburetors. Got O-rings on either end of it. I had a couple of these over here in the other miscellaneous pile. So that's that. So we're getting pretty close to being able to build a complete set here. I've got 4 rebuild kits, and it says that it has the float bowl gasket, needle valve, jet needle, E-clip, air screw, air spring, main jet, which is a 110, slow jet, number 40, O-ring, washer, gasket, top cover. So that's what's in this kit. And there it is, all in one bag. Last but not least, 4-pod air filters. Am I going to use these? Probably so. I've been told by a couple of former CB750 racer guys that these do quite well on these carburetors. So since I got them, what the hell, I'll give it a shot. I'm usually an advocate of keeping the stock air box. There you have it. All the carburetor stuff laying out on the bench, and we're ready to get started. This is all the stuff that's going to get used here to build up a set of 4 carburetors, along with some of the little bits and pieces of all of this hardware right here. Those are my spare float bowls, spare carburetors, other spare parts and bits, and the jar of extra goodies that go with those carburetors. I may go ahead and build those up at some point and maybe put those up for sale. But it's time to get started on rebuilding these now. First thing we're going to do is take these apart. These bodies, every piece will come out of them. I'll go ahead and put all those pieces individually into this handy little container that I got when I bought the bike. All the pieces were in there, so it's kind of nice. I got 4 containers right there. I can keep all 4 carburetor parts separate. And we'll do that, then we'll start cleaning up the bodies, which actually look pretty good and clean. Make sure all of the orifices and passageways are really clean. And then we'll put them back together, adjust the float heights. Let's talk about the orientation of these carburetors. They are not all identical. Right now we're looking at the side that would go toward the engine. If you look on the edge right here, there's a little nipple right there. There's one right here. The next carburetor over, there's a rubber hose right here. This one is a little bit, hardened up and kind of junk. This side has no hole at all. So what goes on here is these 2 join together at that rubber hose, and what that line is the vent for the float bowl to allow air to come into the float bowl. So that line will go usually to the air box or filtered air. We can take care of that later. Over on this side, it's the same thing, just mirrored the other way. We've got the nipple on this side, the outlet there, and the hose here. Now another thing to pay attention to is where those fuel lines go in. This is that fuel line connector that I was showing you earlier with the O-rings there and there. Right here on the side of this carburetor is a place where this pushes in. This carburetor has an opening here that leads right into the opening for the fuel that goes into the float bowl, and when it joins together, it joins that fuel line to each one of those carburetors. Now if we just move over here, we've got another one here, and that would go right here between these two carburetors. So when you're working on these, just bear in mind the way that they go when you put them back together. And when I tear them down into my little bins here, this is the way that I'm going to have them facing toward me. I'm going to have the engine side facing up, and then I'm going to put all the pieces right into each one of these bins, and then I'll know just exactly how they go back together later. Let's take these 3 carburetors and set them aside, and we'll just leave them in the order they're in. We're going to start taking this one apart. You need a good flat blade screwdriver with a fine tip on it, a good quality one, small pair of pliers, 10mm wrench, 8mm wrench. You can also use a 10 and an 8mm socket. Let's flip this upside down. There's the float right there. There's a pin right here that runs through the float and holds it in place. I've got these little tiny pliers that I'm pretty sure I can grab a hold of that pin with. If not, I'm going to give it a push with a tiny punch here. If I can find one over here in my toolbox. Just going to give that a little push with my automatic center punch, and the pin is starting to come out. I'm going to grab it on this end, right toward the end so I don't mess it up. Pull that pin out. Let's put that in the box. There's the float. This float is a little bent up, not too surprising considering that this thing was banging around in a box and got transported a lot. So let's put that in the box. Now right here is the needle and seat valve. This is where the fuel comes in. This is the needle valve. This one is a metal-ended needle valve. Let's see if I can get the macro focus to kick in. But we're going to keep all the old parts anyway. Keep the old parts always until you're completely done with the job. This is the seat for that needle valve where the fuel comes in. We'll just go ahead and break that loose with the 10mm wrench or a socket. A socket may be a little easier to work with on that. In fact, I think I'll just go ahead and grab one. Let's just spin that out now with the socket. Now we'll go over here to the main jet. Make sure you got a good screwdriver that fits it properly. Push down on there and break it loose. The whole thing may come out at once, which it did. This is the emulsion tube, the thing with the tiny little holes in it. We're going to talk a little more about what that does later. I'll explain a little bit of how a carburetor works, but for right now we're going to put an 8mm wrench on that part of it, and we're going to unscrew the main jet from the emulsion tube. So there's my main jet. Got a tiny little hole in it. Now we're going to take out the other air jet. It's the slow jet. That is the float bowl gasket I just pulled off, and we're going to keep that too. Keep all the old parts for now. Now let's flip this back over to the other side. Up here we have a screw that will come out where you would stick in a hose that goes to a vacuum gauge or a setup to synchronize the carburetors. Now we'll take out the idle mixture screw. This will be a little needle shaped screw. It's got a taper on the tip right there and a hole in it. Let's put that in the parts box. There will be a spring in there. There's the spring. Tiny little spring. Make sure you keep that. And that's it. That carburetor has been disassembled. That's all there is to it. And now we're going to clean up all this stuff. We're going to blast some carb cleaner and compressed air through all of these passages. There's a hole there, one there, through here, through here, through here. Make sure all of the orifices are free, clear, and open. And then we're going to scrub this a little bit to get rid of some of this oxidation that's in here. But for now, that's that one. And now I'm going to do the same thing to the rest of these three and put the parts in the proper bins. So just looking at the book here, this Haynes workshop manual, let's see, main jet size in here says 120. And after looking at one of these main jets again after cleaning it off a bit. It's not 35 in there, it actually says 135. So these have jets in them that are just a little bit bigger than stock. Not so bad. I may just go ahead and leave that alone because it'll run a little bit richer on a brand new engine. Breaking in, richer is going to be a little better than a 100, which is what comes in here. That's a little bit lean. So, okay, let's just keep moving along here. Once you get these pretty well cleaned up of all of the white powdery crap, then we'll start blowing out all of the orifices. So for starters, we can go right here on the side where the float bowl vent is, spray in there, and you should see out of this area right here, you should see some fluid come out. See it right there shooting out the side. Watch out for it shooting back in your face. That's not a good thing. Let's see, the next one would be right here, the slow jet hole. Squirt a little into that, and you should see it come out inside the bore there. See it shooting out there. So you know that that orifice is open. This is the main jet here, this one. That's the big one, and that's a pretty good size hole. That's where the needle goes. You'll see some brake clean come through there, parts cleaner. I call it brake clean because that's what they call it, is brake and parts cleaner. But anyway, let's see, the next thing we want to go for is the fuel inlet area, and it will come out right here, blast a little back the other way. Then we got the idle mixture screw. Just push the wand all the way down in there, and that should come out right here on the slow jet. See it shooting out there. So that's about it. That's pretty much the main orifices you need to check out. Oh, there's one more right here, the air bleed for idle. That's right there, and that goes into the main. I guess that's the main air bleed. So you should see some stuff shoot out of the main jet area when you squirt it in there. So that's about it. We'll do that to all the carburetors now, and then we can put jets back in. Okay, we just opened another package. This one has the idle mixture screw, a new spring, there's an O-ring, and there's a washer. The spring goes on the idle mixture screw, and that goes right in here in the slot. We're going to turn that in all the way, and right until it just bottoms out. Now we're going to back it out 1.5 turns. There's 1.5. Oops. That's going to be the initial setting that we're just going to leave that at for now. I've got a new needle here, but it doesn't have the clip on the end. The clip is on the old needle. You'll notice there are 4 different settings. There's 4 different grooves in the end of the needle, and that determines where it sits in the main jet. And the further down you go, the higher that's going to set, and the richer the mixture will be. And as you go to the top groove, you're going to let the thing drop down further, and it's going to be at the leanest setting. What we're going to do on this one is put it in the middle to start out with. We'll just slide that onto the middle slot. There are 5 slots there. Okay, it's on the middle slot. We'll set that aside for now. There's a little E-clip in this package. That goes on the needle. The needle is what moves up and down with the throttle slide. There are some slots on the end of the needle. There's 5 of them. If you put the little clip all the way at the bottom slot, that's going to be the richest mixture because it's going to allow the needle to come up higher. When it's just at rest, at idle, it's higher, and it will be higher throughout the entire range of throttle motion. If you put it all the way at the top, that's going to be the leanest because it's got a taper to it. As it goes further in the hole, it plugs up the hole more because of the larger diameter of the taper. So it makes the mixture leaner. We're going to start out with this one in the middle. We're definitely going to be some doing some tuning here with this thing, so tricky. Get on there, you little bastard. Put that in the middle slot. There we go. There's a little washer right here that was in that package. We're going to pull out the screw on the side here where you put in a vacuum hose for sinking the carburetors. That has a tiny aluminum washer on it. We're going to go ahead and pull that off. Let's put the new washer on, and that's what it looks like there. There's the screw with its new washer. It's a little aluminum sealing washer. Put that in the carb and tighten it up. Got a little O-ring here that I haven't been able to figure out what it's used for on this carburetor. I'm going to set that aside for now, and we'll move on to the next item, which is the needle and seat valve. This is what meters the fuel flow coming into the carburetor. There's the needle valve. Now this one comes with a metal needle valve. We'll put the needle valve aside for now, and let's put the seat in. That's a 10mm socket that tightens that up. Snug that down good. And we're going to leave the carburetor sitting like this. We'll drop the needle valve in. Now let's get the float out and the rod for the float. Now I'm going to look at the back of this and do whatever I can to straighten it out. It's a little bit bent. Got to be careful when you do this. Don't bend on the actual float part itself. You could break that. It's best to grab it with a pair of needle nose pliers and do any bending and straightening you have to do that way. So that looks pretty good right there. Make sure that the part that it pivots on is nice and parallel with the rest of the float. Now there's a little tab right here in the middle. That little tab is what you use to adjust the float height. And you would bend it down, and what that would do is drop it more this way. That will lower the float bowl level, so there'll be less gas in the float bowl. If you bend it up towards us, that will allow the float to go further up in the float bowl. You'll have more gas in there. For now, we'll just leave it right where it is. We're going to go ahead and shove the pin in. Push it all the way through to the other side. You may have to give it a little tap. Just grab it with the pliers and give it a little push. Just until you see it poke out the other side a little bit. There you go. Now we can adjust the float height. Alright, let's do the float level. You'll need a caliper or a ruler, something that you can measure 26mm with. I have mine set right now to 26mm, the gap between the two jaws. We're going to measure from the edge of the bottom of the carburetor base to this part of the float. Now let me show you something up close here. The float valve has two parts to it, and one part has a little spring-loaded section. Right now it's just, let it fall, it's just resting against the float valve. If I push, that is the spring-loaded part. So you don't want to measure it there, you want to measure it right there. So you just kind of tip it, let it fall, and we're going to measure it right there. So once it's in that position, we'll just put the gauge up here, and from the base of the carburetor, right from the outer lip to that bottom part of the float should be 26mm. And it looks like this one is close enough. This next carburetor ended up with the float a little too high. You can see right there, it's not where it's supposed to be. It's a little bit high. See, it's a little high. Should be like right there, and it's right there. So what I do is bend this little tab, that one right there. That little tab has to be bent up. And I could pull it back off and bend it, but I can do it this way too. Just gently give it a little pry up on that side, and a little pry up on that side. Tiny bit. Tiny bit makes a big difference. Let's check it again. And that looks good. Now that we have the float level adjusted, we can put the float bowl gasket in place. Make sure it's pressed down in there all the way. Let's put a float bowl on there. And we'll grab one of the bales over here. And that's going to end up mounting on there like that. Push it into one of the holes on one side here. And then we're going to go to the other side. We'll hook it in the other hole. Make sure that the gasket's in there good. Let's check that one more time. Everything looks good. Let's put the base on there. Just pull back on the bale and that's it. That carburetor is done on the bottom end. There we go, all 4 carbies with the bottom end put together. Now we can go ahead and put the needle into the throttle slide and get that assembly together into the top part of the carburetor. In between that last scene and now, I cleaned the bench off and decided to paint it. Been needing to do that for a while. Anyway, makes for a little better video background, don't you think? Okay, let's get to the sliders and their assembly. We've got a needle that goes into the throttle slide. It drops in the top here, just like that. Pokes out the bottom. Now, on a lot of carburetors, there's a clip that holds that in. On the earlier CB Keyhen carburetors, there's a little clip, kind of looks like an X that slides in there, holds that in place, and then there's a spring on the top that goes in there, a long spring. You screw the top on, and then that's what gives you the throttle return. Not on this setup. It's a little bit different. What goes on here is this little retainer right here that sits on top of the needle. Needle sits like right there. This goes, whoops, this goes on top of it. Tiny little thing, hard to hang on to. Sits like that, and 2 screws go in it, and that hold it in. And it also gets this assembly. This is the rod that lifts the throttle slide. A little spring goes onto the rod first. Let's get up close and personal here. There's a little spring. See that spring? That goes on first. Then what you do is you catch the spring on that little yoke right there, and then you slide that into place. So you see how that whole assembly goes together right there. Now that we have that assembly together, we need to put it into the slide, and that requires some tiny little screws, 3mm screws with a lock washer on them. I had to go buy these at the hardware store. Fortunately, my local old-timey hardware store carries a lot of cool hardware because these are hard to get a hold of elsewhere. They were missing. Couldn't find them in any of the stuff. So what I'm going to do is put 2 of these screws into this little retainer. I'll show you what that looks like up close there. See those 2 screws? 2 screws are poking through there. And now we're going to put it down inside the slider. We're going to line it up with those holes right there. Now this is the part you need to pay attention to as to the orientation of this way versus this way. If the slot on the slider right there, the locator slot keeps the slider from rotating, if that is facing away from you, right? I'm over here, facing away from me, then the screws go towards the left. Got it? Slot faces away from you, screws over toward the left. So we're going to drop it down in there. And this is going to be a little hard for me to do this and also keep it on camera at the same time. But what I'm going to do is get a screwdriver down in there at the same time. I'm going to drop it down in part way and get a screw started in one of those holes in the slider. Okay, got one. So you can have this whole assembly help you hold it together while you do this. It's a little tricky. The first time I did this before I shot this scene, I practiced, and it was a bit tricky, but I figured out this method, which works quite nicely. So we're going to run those screws all the way down and tighten them up. plenty tight. There we go. There's one slider assembly ready to go into a carburetor. Oh yeah, one more thing before we move on. Remember the O-rings I had left over? They go on the drain plug on the bottom of each float bowl. And one of them was really tight, and I tried taking it out and it broke on me a minute ago. These O-rings in this one are so old and dried up that I have to cut them off with a razor blade. So we'll take that one off, put a new one on, and then we'll spin that back into the float bowl. And if I can get the rest of them to cooperate, I'll replace all of them too. If it doesn't want to unscrew, I'm just going to leave it alone because I don't want to break another one. Fortunately, I had a replacement float bowl spare off to the side. All you got to do is snug that, and it's good enough because it has an O-ring. That takes care of that. As I mentioned, I broke one of these drain plugs in the float bowl, which kind of sucks, but I can get this one out because I've got a little trick. All you need is a little torch. I've got a little butane torch here. I put a little bit of PB Blaster in there. I let it soak for a while. I'm going to put some heat right on the brass drain plug. Get it warmed up really well. Probably keep it on there for a full minute or so. We'll jump ahead in the video. After about a minute of heat on the actual drain plug, now I'm going to put a little bit of heat on the float bowl, right on the aluminum. Now this is a tiny torch, so if you're using any kind of other torch, like an oxyacetylene torch, right now this would be just melting into a puddle and could be crying. So I'm going to keep a little heat on that section right there now. Get a large flat blade screwdriver in here and start turning, and look at that, it breaks loose just like that. Now when I was trying this earlier, I could not break it loose at all. So there you go, there's a little trick to get those out. And of course, don't grab that right now because it will burn you. The chokes on these carburetors are this device right here. It's just a little flap. I'll show you what happens when air gets sucked in. This flap opens, and that's pretty much the only opening you have, is what's right there, that little hole. And then that makes it pull more gas. Again, I'll explain a little more later how carburetors work and you'll understand why. But this is what gets pushed in the way on the intake right here. Instead of having it wide open like that with the hole, it closes down and then allows more fuel to get in. So here's how these go together. You take this part, you drop it in this slot right here in the top on the intake side. It just drops down in there. You can see it right there. And then if I move it up out of the way, you see the hole is wide open, chokes in place, and it's actually choking off the airflow and allowing only a tiny bit through. Now what actuates that is this little lever right here. It moves like so, and it moves the choke up and down. What turns this is this lever right here. So the first thing you do is you put the choke plate in, and then right here on the top you'll drop this piece in. There's a little slot right here on the side, and this is what this is going to do. This is going to set inside the carburetor like that. It's going to be inside there in that little slot, sitting just like this. There's a peg on here that sticks out right there. That little peg has to be pointing that way towards the engine. So I'm just going to tip this on its side, and I'm going to drop that in. And now that I've turned the carburetor around, the side toward the engine is toward me, the pin is going to point toward me, and I'm going to drop it down into that slot. Now I'm just going to let it flip down into place, and then if you just wiggle around a little on the carburetor and you poke around in there with a little screwdriver, you can get it to go into the little slot, and there it is. It's in there. So now we need to put the lever on that actuates all that mess, and there's two flats on this side of the rod. They catch on that little lever, so you poke this through. You're going to want to wiggle it around until it catches on that lever, and it's pointing like that. That's in the choke position. That is not the choke position. That's when it's wide open. Let me show you on the other side. You'll see it move. So when I push it like this, choke, not choked. Choke, not choked. Now we need to put the nut and washer assembly on this side. Make sure that that little insert is in there. There's a little nylon insert that goes in this side. Then we'll go ahead and put the washers on. And just for a little insurance on making sure that that nut doesn't come back off, I'm going to put a tiny little bit of Loctite. Just a wee bit. I'm going to spin that nut on. It's a 7mm socket. Let's tighten it up. And it will tighten up, and this should still rotate. And it just kind of not too tight, just a good snug on there. You got a lock washer on it, and it should just move freely. Should be some resistance to it, but it should move fairly freely. That's it. Now we have that choke assembly taken care of. Now if you want to, you could put a little bit of lube on these before you put them together. What I'm going to put on it is a little bit of this stuff. It's dry slide. It's a graphite lubricant. And it's graphite with a carrier that evaporates. I've used it before in a few other videos. I really like it because it doesn't leave a big mess behind. The graphite will get in there and stay, and the solvent that's in there will penetrate, carry the graphite in there with it. Graphite stays behind. It makes for a really good lube. It moves a whole lot easier now. Alright, we've got a choke in there now. By the way, this is number 3 carburetor, and it gets this style lever, and I think it's the one that's all the way over on the left side of the bike that gets that style lever, and it's got the word choke written on it, and it's where you can move it and do the choke. Now we get to put the slide in and all of its components. So here we go. We've got the slot on this side because the peg is over on this side, and that should drop in if I wiggle it a little, just like that. Now we've got a cover that's going to go on here. There's a rubber gasket there. We've got a new one that came with the rebuild kit. Go ahead and put that in place. Push it down on there. Now we're going to put this on top. The 2 pegs here line up with the 2 holes right there. Just like that. Then we have a retaining collar that goes on. Make sure you don't cross thread that. It should spin on nice and easy. And just get your fingers around there and hand tight. Just good snug up with your hands is plenty because you're squishing it against the rubber, so that should just be fine. Let's check the movement of the throttle. That's fine. It's in there the right way. Okay, now we're going to put this on. This is the collar that the lifting arm will go on later, and that moves up and down like that. That's what moves the throttle up and down. So we're going to screw that on next. Take that just like this. For now we're going to run it down to just where it touches, and we're going to back it up a little bit. Put the washer on, put the nut on, and later on we will adjust these to get them all exactly synchronized the way they're supposed to be. For right now, that is a completed carburetor ready to mount up on the carburetor rack with a working choke. We're getting closer to a completed engine here. We've got carburetors that are put together and ready to mount up to the rack. We're going to do that next time. We'll get them on the rack, and we will go ahead and mount up the actuator arms, get them all synchronized here in the bench, at least mechanically, and we'll get them on the engine. Now, I've worked from 3 different manuals on this build, and with the carburetors, okay, I got the old factory manual, doesn't cover these carburetors. The Climber manual, not much at all. This one, the old Haynes manual, covers these carburetors, gives you a quick adjustment on that top section that I just got done putting on. Doesn't go into too much other detail, but basically the rest of the carburetor is pretty close to the same thing. So when you're getting ready to do this kind of a work, take a look at what carbs you have.
you may have to go searching around on eBay and find the proper manual. Now, a really good one is the one from Honda Man called My CB750. Not cheap. It's about 70 to 100 bucks depending on where you buy it, soft cover, hard cover, but that is a really good manual. Haven't looked at it myself. I've had people tell me some information from it. I have to own one of those at some point. But anyway, that's a good one to have if you're rebuilding a CB750. It's got a ton of information in it. Probably covers these carburetors in depth a little more than the manuals I have here. So keep that in mind when you're jumping into your carburetor rebuild. But basically you've got an overview now of what goes on, what needs to be done, and next time we'll get them mounted up in the engine. Then we'll go searching for an exhaust system for this thing so we can fire it up. So thanks for watching, and thanks for the donations as always. Until next time.
To begin with, they're not all identical.